It's Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live. The Penguins beat the Canadiens 6-0 to break out of a three-game regulation losing streak. Pretty rare thing for the Penguins in the Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin era to lose three straight games in regulation, but that's where they sat, partially because they haven't had, well, a full-strength Sidney Crosby, certainly, and not Malkin at all, as we all well know. But as we also know, the NHL doesn't stop because of the Penguins' personnel problems. And again, Mike Sullivan was forced to stay back at home because of Canada's increased or more stringent COVID-19 restrictions, I guess I should put it that way. But didn't matter. The Penguins scored 3 goals in the first period and kept a struggling Montreal team down, something they were unable to do against the Buffalo Sabres the other night at home. So on the road, they get things going here on what will be a long stretch of games away from home, mostly. They have a couple of home games coming up, of course, that traditional one before Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving Eve, whatever you want to call it, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving against Vancouver at PPG Paints. And then that same Saturday, that same week on Saturday, they play Montreal at home. But outside of that, it's going to be all away from Pittsburgh. They've got Toronto this Saturday. They've got at Winnipeg on Monday. And they've got at New York at the new building next Friday on Black Friday. And then there's that 5-game Western trip: Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver, Seattle, Washington. And with the Penguins just leveling their record at 6-6-4, yeah, they've got some work ahead of them. And it's been really difficult to evaluate this team, I would say. And, well, part of the reason has been the absence of Crosby, their linchpin forever and ever. And also it's been I guess, the depleted nature of this roster overall. We just see some players trickling back in. We saw Brian Rust a few games ago, Chris Letang a little bit before that. Dominic Simone, even though you may think that he's not that big of a deal, but still, the Penguins' depth was extremely affected, adversely affected by the COVID-19 positive tests here. If you thought we were out of the woods, well, we certainly are not out of the woods with regards to that, with the Ottawa Senators having 3 games canceled this week, which also, if you didn't know, opened the door for the NHL to back out of the Winter Olympics coming up in Beijing. I suppose that's getting way ahead of ourselves, but maybe not. Just keep that in mind because there's still that opt-out possibility there in that agreement. But not really relevant regarding the Penguins here. It is good to see them get a laugher. They haven't had too many of them this year. Last time I spoke with you was after the shootout win over Florida. That was prior to the 3 losses in a row, and that was a game in which they had to come back in that win over Florida. And it was also a game that was like most of them early on this season, where it's down to a couple of bounces here or there. And I said that last week before they got blown out in Ottawa, got blown out by Washington. So good to see them turn it the other way. They played really 2 pretty good back-to-back games here against teams that are not in their caliber. I realize the Penguins are not in the playoff hunt right now, or they're in the hunt, but they're not in playoff position at the moment, very early on this season. But we can agree they're superior to both Buffalo and I think Montreal, without Carey Price, without Shea Weber probably forever, and with Philip Deneau moving on to LA, with Jesperi Kotkaniemi down in Carolina. It's definitely a diminished team, and I noted that the Canadiens have fallen a long way in the 5 months since they played in the Stanley Cup final. But I think we're going to look back at that Montreal team and say, how in the world did they get there? Well, part of it was because they were playing in an all-Canadian division and an all-Canadian first 2 rounds of the playoffs. Hey, give them credit. They upset Toronto. They upset Vegas, of course. They beat Winnipeg, too. So it was all well-earned last spring. I'm not saying it wasn't, but talk about your all-time flukes. And it's not just about the individual players they're missing. It's about a team that looks totally lost out there under a coach that just got extended after leading his team to the Cup final, and Dominic Ducharme. But I suppose that's Montreal's problem. And if you think the Penguins were in dire straits is what's going on in Montreal right now with a team that I believe has won just 3 times and is challenging Phoenix for the bottom of the NHL standings. Actually, Arizona, pardon me. I'm calling them Phoenix now because they're wearing the old jerseys back when they were actually the Phoenix Coyotes. Anyway, this is Matt Gajtka. This is Pittsburgh Postgame. Whatever you want to talk about regarding the Pens. Jamie chimes in, says, what's up? Good to talk to you. Good to see you, Jamie. I've been hinting that I want to do more of these shows, but I just haven't had the opportunity, whether it be kids in play. I've got 2 little ones at home, or whether it be some high school hockey games that I'm broadcasting. I've got a couple coming up later this week up here in my new home of Grand Rapids. But thanks to the magic of the internet and ESPN Plus, I'm able to watch basically all the Penguins games that I ever did when I was living in Pittsburgh. Sidney Crosby scores the first goal of the season and the first goal of this game, thanks to Bob Grove, Penguins historian, for this nugget that it's the 95th time in the regular season that Crosby has scored first. And as Steve Mears noted on the AT&T broadcast tonight on the TV side, Crosby has had a knack for scoring very early in games. He's done that quite a bit over his career. And this one, maybe not quite as early as we've seen, but still for the Pens to jump on top after a very frustrating 2-1 loss to Buffalo the other night when they nearly launched 50 shots at Dustin Tokarski and just got one measly goal to go behind him. To see a few go in early has got to make the team feel good. They also got a lucky bounce on the Denton Heinen power play goal. Those end boards were lively, weren't they, tonight? It was like Joe Louis Arena back in the day times 2. It was insane. I'm not sure what's going on up there. They don't replace those boards very often, I don't assume, at the Bell Center. The Canadiens are the primary tenant, and it's not like they have a basketball team that plays there too. So very interesting to see the boards that springy. Yeah, we have never seen that before, but it was to the benefit of the Penguins and Danton Heinen in that situation. And then Jay Gensel stayed hot before the end of the first period, whipping a shot through traffic and in behind the young goaltender Primo, making, I believe, what was just his 5th career appearance in the NHL. Difficult assignment behind a team that looked totally out of sorts in its own zone, honestly, across the board. That Teddy Blueger goal, though, the 4th goal, I'm not seeing an NHL team defend a 3-on-3 rush that poorly in a long, long time, if ever. They turned a 3-on-3 into a 2-on-0 somehow as 3 players converged on 1. And, hey, the Penguins made the play, and Blueger and Aston Reese were away, and Blueger powered it home. He also scored a breakaway goal, did Blueger, in the final minute, singular, with 10 seconds left to provide the final margin there. And also Mike Matheson scored a long-range goal as well. So the Penguins spread it around. Teddy Blueger had 3 points. Sid gets his first of the season. I mentioned the Penguins being difficult to evaluate to this point, and a huge part of it is Crosby. Crosby himself is difficult to evaluate, and there were some interesting factoids being thrown out there, stats, if you want to call them that. I just call them fun facts, or maybe not so fun facts in the case of Crosby here. But dating back to Sid's last, I think it was 12 games or something, he was 3 points on the board. That's it. Maybe a -8, something like that. Really unfair to to group last year's stats with this year, considering he has been injured and rehabbing, and also went through a pretty serious bout of COVID-19, as Mike Sullivan alluded to on the broadcast tonight during a first period interview. He said it hit Sid pretty hard, and we all know Sid is one of the best conditioned athletes in the world, definitely one of the best conditioned athletes in hockey, and one of the best we've ever seen in the city of Pittsburgh on the pro sports scene. But this virus can knock you down regardless of who you are. You don't have to be an immunocompromised person or someone who is otherwise susceptible to serious illness. Sid is still clearly not himself, but we saw more flashes of that tonight, and we saw a lot of good stuff from that top line. That's the first time in a long time we've seen a Penguins line have multiple really good shifts in the O zone consecutively. We saw Gensel and Rust and Crosby all combine on that first goal. Honestly, Rust probably could have had another goal in that first period, but he whiffed on a glorious chance. And then I told you about Gensel's goal late in the first. That was after a partial line change, but still, it's good to see a threesome that the Penguins could count on in that situation. The Penguins now level their record at 6-6-4. And, here they are, still out of the playoff chase and still, I believe, 7th in the Metropolitan Division. At least they were 7th coming into tonight. And only ahead of the Islanders, who have opened their season with 13 consecutive road games. So not exactly fair to perhaps judge them against the Islanders. Not fair from the Islanders' perspective, not from the Pens' perspective. But there are also mitigating circumstances on the Pens side, too, as we all know. And actually, the Pens have moved up a spot. They're now 6th in the Metro Division. So, yay, I suppose. You got to get in the top 3 to get an automatic qualifying spot in the playoffs. And, of course, wild cards are going to be up for grabs here. But you know what? Even though I've downplayed, I think, where the Penguins are at right now, just because they're not at full strength, the fact is they're about 20% of the way through the NHL season, maybe a little bit more than that now, in fact, after tonight, after their 16th game. And they're in a spot of trouble. This is a spot they haven't been in this at this juncture of the season. I know it's just 16 games, but still, they're typically a hot starting club. And even when they haven't been terrific out of the gate, by 16 games or so, especially by 20 games, they've righted themselves over the past 15 years during this playoff streak. In fact, the last time they were this poor in terms of on-ice results, wins, losses, and overtime losses through 16 games, the Pens just with 6 wins. Last time they only had 6 wins through this level of competition, through this number of games, was 2005-06, when they only had 4 at this point. And that was a total disaster season coming off the lockout, high expectations for what used to be called the X generation, some free agents signed, Ziggy Palffy, Sergei Gonchar. People forget Gonch wasn't so great out of the gate, or maybe some forget that he wasn't. But John LeClaire was on that team, so was Mark Recchi, and it didn't go well. Mario Lemieux was on that team. That was his final go-around, his final few games, in fact. I think he only played 15 or 20 in that 05-06 season, and that was Marc-Andre Fleury getting thrown to the Wolves quite a bit in that year, too. And that was the first year for Michel Therrien taking over at midseason. So a lot of bad things for the Penguins in 05-06. History they do not want to repeat. History they shouldn't repeat, but it bears mentioning that they really haven't had to have some huge rally to make the playoffs in almost any of these years. You might recall 08-09, of course, another year with a midseason coaching change from Therrien to Dan Bylsma. They were right around what I'll call NHL 500, where your wins and losses match up, but the overtime losses are kind of factored out. So it's pretty tough to be actually below NHL 500 when you look at it that way. And the Penguins were coming into tonight at 5-6-4 after that loss. You could say an undeserved loss to Buffalo, but still not finishing chances and not capitalizing when they have had long stretches of good play in recent weeks. But tonight, anything but the case, as they were able to take care of business over the Montreal Canadiens. And still a lot of work to do. That's my general point, is they haven't been in this spot. And they're not going to get Malkin back for still a few weeks, it appears. And even when he comes back, he's going to need a grace period to get himself going, you would imagine. And even if everybody was healthy, this was not a team that was going to be anyone's favorite to win a Stanley Cup, maybe to make the playoffs, sure. And I still feel like this team was in a good spot at the end of last season. But you lose players. You lose guys like Jared McCann and Brandon Tanev to a lesser degree. And that's going to hurt. And it did hurt. And I think it has hurt the Penguins this year, when they love to have both those guys, especially McCann, who's shooting the lights out with the Kraken. And that appeared to be a very strange move that was made in the offseason to expose him, to let him go, actually trade him to the Maple Leafs, and then they let him go to the Kraken. But either way, the Penguins voluntarily give up Jared McCann, and that's a player that I wish they would have found a way to make room for. Although the guy that they signed to cover up for that loss, so to speak, the guy that they used some of that cap hit for, or that would be cap hit for McCann, was Teddy Blueger, and he had 3 points tonight. So maybe it's not the best night to bring that up, but I think I'd still rather have Jared McCann than Teddy Blueger. No offense to Teddy, who plays a nice role in the Penguins' bottom 6. It's been an eventful week for the Penguins, too. Let's talk ownership, because, of course, Fenway Sports Group is about ready to buy the Penguins, it appears, according to multiple reports, including the Wall Street Journal and Sportico, who had it first the other day, for what that's worth. For me, I'm excited, because I've often wondered, how long was Ron Burkle going to continue to pour his own personal money? I say personal, but it's his business. But he's got a lot of holdings, and he's been spending some money, including on the Neverland Ranch last year, you might recall. But you can't expect someone like him, who has no real connection to the city of Pittsburgh, to be part of this thing forever. And as it turns out, he won't be. He's going to be divesting himself of all of his shares of Penguins ownership. Mario Lemieux appears to be sticking around in some sort of a minority ownership situation, and I'm glad for that. An ambassador role, maybe still getting some of his hands in things on the hockey operations side, and I don't have a problem with that, certainly. And I think that he and Burkle have set up a pretty decent hockey operations side right now. I like the combo of Burke and Hextall, even though, of course, the grade for them has to be incomplete at this point of the year, since they're not even a year into their collective tenures. It was at the end of, actually, the beginning of February last year when they took over. So it's only been several months, and still a long way to go there. But I would love the idea of keeping Mario around. It appears he will. And I also love the idea of a conglomerate of the stature of Fenway Sports Group, which has done, I think, a good job with the Red Sox, and of course Liverpool, helping them to their first English Premier League title in forever, in many decades. They also have a group in NASCAR too. In case you didn't know, I'm not a big stock car racing follower, so I don't know much about that. but I do know that they've got plenty of financial firepower. And what's going to take that to buy the team, because the Penguins are about middle of the road in the NHL in terms of franchise value. You might say, shouldn't they be a little bit higher? But if you're Pittsburgh and as a market, they're about 22nd in market size in the U.S., I believe, maybe a little bit higher. And as far as the NHL goes, with the Canadian teams mixed in, and of course, New York having 3 teams, the metro area, LA having 2, Chicago has 1, but you get the picture there. Even though the Penguins are middling sized market, I think average to slightly above average is a pretty good ballpark guess on where they would be when you're talking about NHL valuations. But anyway, I am excited to see a legit business operation like Fenway Sports Group be very interested in buying the Penguins. This is a group that doesn't need to buy a team to to occupy itself. Obviously, like I said, they've got a lot of holdings in the sports world. So the fact that they sought out the Penguins in this way, as far as what we know, that bodes well for the value of the Penguins on the open market. And it just validates what they are as one of the premier franchises in the NHL, even as we get toward the end of the Crosby Malkin era. Gaming with Geo joins us on the live chat. He says, glad to see the boys getting a win. Yeah, it's just got to be a relief for them. And I don't want to ever gloss over that fact, the human side of sports. I'm such an analytically minded person when it comes to this, and I've made much of my career in sports on taking the emotion out of it, because I tend to be an emotional person. There's a little hint for you. There's a walking contradiction. But I think a lot of people who lean on information are like me, in that they tend to maybe in some cases get swept up in the emotion of the moment. And I've been known to do that, whether I'm competing myself or just watching on TV. So it is comforting to know that there are hard numbers out there and there's data that you can look to. But when you're playing on the team, it's a real factor. And it was good to see a guy like Jake Gensel break into a smile at the end of the first period after his goal went in. Heck, Teddy Blueger scoring twice. He's not going to do that very much throughout the rest of his NHL career. I can tell you that much. No offense to him, but combine his role with his middling to average skill at this level. This is going to be one of those banner nights he looks back on, and hopefully gets the Penguins going and gives them some confidence. And they're going to need some confidence to carry them on the road. Like I said, they've got so many games away from home. You see Tristan Jarry as well pick up the shutout. So perhaps things are turning for Jarry too. I think he had a good night against the Sabres. A tough night to play. I know that I would give, obviously, the first start to Dustin Tokarski the other night. But a lot of times when you're playing a team that's only throwing, 10 or 15 shots at you and almost nothing in the third period, it's pretty difficult to be on your game and sharp when those chances do come against you. So Jarry got the, didn't get the win, but I think gets a gold star from me for his performance against the Sabres. Of course, he broke that shootout, Schneid. He broke that slump against the Panthers about a week and a half ago. And, he wasn't in net for the Capitals debacle, even though he did give up, he was in net for the Capitals debacle. We didn't give up 6 to the Ottawa Senators. So I guess we got to look for small victories at this point in some ways, considering how the past week has gone for the Penguins. But I've liked Jarry a lot, and I think if you look at some of the advanced goaltending numbers, he's right up there. I think if you just watch the games, he's right up there. The Penguins haven't been able to, in a lot of cases, take advantage of some of the chances they've had at the offensive end, tonight notwithstanding. So it's been on Jarry to keep them in it, and it was going pretty well for a while there until they got to about, the start of November, and then we saw a downturn here in the standings and in their results. So they still have some ground to make up, but there are a couple of positives there. It still is difficult for me to judge the entire team, though, with guys like Russ just coming back in the lineup. Letang is now, I think, back into a groove, which is nice. We'll see if Sid can keep it going, because obviously he's crucial without Malkin in the lineup. And just with the way that things are going right now, they need that dose of leadership. And Mike Sullivan always talks about how Sid is an inspirational leader, quote unquote, and a guy that will make you sit up on the bench and lean forward and just take note and try to follow his lead whenever things are going awry, and he's able to put together a great shift. We didn't really see that in his first couple of games of the season, but I'm willing to grade on a scale here, not only because of his age, obviously. He's not an old man by any means, but at 34 years old, it's not going to maybe come back quite as quickly, even though he's had some great comebacks in his career, but he's at a different stage now. But also COVID is so different from an injury like the wrist. I was actually thinking he was going to be ready to go and maybe stronger than ever coming off the wrist surgery, but now COVID has put a stop to that. And who knows how long the symptoms last. Chris Letang said it was basically a hard day of practice that cleared the nonsense out of his lungs. We'll put it that way. And I'm not sure about Sid. He hasn't talked about it extensively. I didn't see the post-game interviews, but I have to imagine it's the same way. In a sport like hockey that's so cardiovascularly taxing and it puts so much stress on you, it's not exactly like baseball where you can roll out there. No offense to the baseball players out there or folks who like to watch it, because I do too. But this is a little different, and this is about as intense of a professional sport as there is. So, and with Sid, he's as that one chiropractor once said when he was working on the neck issues and all that. Sidney Crosby is a Ferrari, so a little bit off might be a lot off for him. And tonight's goal, at least to start the game, and also some different situations where he looked a little bit more like himself. That's also a positive. But I don't want to gloss over too much because it has been a challenging and unsettling week for sure in Penguins land. And I hate to be Pollyanna. I don't want to be that way because the reality is that these games are already in the bank. And it's not like the Penguins are going to be able to just start from scratch. They're still technically below 500, although they've gained 50% of their points exactly right down the middle. They've got the 6 wins, they've got the 6 regulation losses, and the 4 overtime losses. So yeah, it's been literally a mediocre start for the Pens at this stage. Guys like Mike Matheson too, John Marino, I feel like they're not at full strength either, and no excuse for them, obviously, but they've been a bit slow to start. So we're not seeing the defense chime in as much. Matheson gets a goal tonight. That's why he's front of mind for me. So that's what I'd like to see more of as well for the Pens. And perhaps they're just trying to play it button down while they had plenty of players out of the lineup. I'm not sure if that was the case, but if it is, I'm not sure the Pens are at their best if they're being a little bit more conservative. So something to look forward to, and hopefully see the team improve is to get more O from the D, get more from the power play too. You're still seeing a player like a Kasperi Kapanen who's going to be getting those first unit power play minutes, and he's just not putting the puck in the net outside of the hat trick against the Wild a couple of weeks ago. It just hasn't been happening for him. Perhaps he can take some solace in watching Jake Gensel, who struggled at the start of the year and also was out of the lineup too, and he's certainly found the range. In fact, I think Kapanen could take a lot from Gensel and his hockey IQ. It just seems like Kapanen a lot of times chases the game and doesn't seem to have, the entire ice in mind, I suppose, whenever he's out there trying to do something with his great talent, his great tools. He certainly has the skating ability, not just the speed, but also the quick cuts. He's got the hands for sure. He has a great shot. Didn't come together for him Toronto on a consistent basis, and last year, I hope, was the start of something good here in Pittsburgh, the team that originally drafted him. And maybe there's some intangibles working in his favor there with a fresh start, new change of scenery, all that. But at the start of this season, when he's really been needed to put the puck in the net, he hasn't been able to do so. So that's something to watch as well. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, even after the biggest win of the season, or tied for the biggest margin of victory of the season. They also beat the Maple Leafs, did the Penguins, by 7-1 at home back in late October. Speaking of the Maple Leafs, they're no longer the Maple Laughs. They are totally functional, and then some. They are now 9-1 in their past 10. At least they were going into tonight. I'm pretty sure they were playing tonight, but I didn't catch their result there. But that'll be the next game for the Pens at Toronto. NHL Network has it outside the market, so I guess I'm SOL when it comes to watching on ESPN+. I was just speaking highly and singing their praises, but it's not all there for you available. So I don't have cable, so I guess I'll have to find some other way to track that game on Saturday night. And then, like I mentioned, at Winnipeg on Monday before coming home for that traditional Thanksgiving Eve game against the Canucks. So we're going to see a healthy dose of some teams we didn't see last year. They were all part of the NHL's North Division, the Canadian teams, Canadiens, Maple Leafs, Jets, and Canucks in that order. Canadiens again coming up next weekend, and then that long road trip out west, which will include 4 out of 5 teams north of the border. So there you go. Thank you for watching Pittsburgh Postgame, kind of an abbreviated version tonight. Not a lot of drama in tonight's game, but I did want to talk to you folks after missing a few here and after what was, like I said, an unsettling stretch for the Pens. But this win combined with, I think, what I would consider to be good ownership news, even though it's not going to be Mario and Ron at the top like it has been since 1999. First of all, not everything lasts forever, certainly not in sports ownership or in the world of sports overall. But second of all, I think this could be an upgrade in some areas and getting some more capital behind the team at a time when attendance isn't that good, and a time when they may have to extend themselves a bit beyond what they're pulling in revenue-wise to fully take advantage of this Crosby Malkin championship window, then I say go for it. I say it's great, and that Fenway Sports Group name certainly brings some prestige too. Not that they need it at this moment, but that always helps as well. Nothing is negative about adding to your reputation in the business world, and hopefully they can get that lower hill finally developed too. I know that's been a bugaboo for the Penguins and their ownership, so I'm also optimistic that what they've done, what Fenway Sports Group has done, especially in Boston with building up the area around Fenway Park, they've really transformed that area from what I understand. So that's a positive thing too. I'm just Mr. Positive tonight, aren't I? Um, as we just watched the Pens win 6-0. It's funny what one of those games can do for your disposition, even though the team is still looking up at a lot of teams in the Metro Division and also in the Eastern Conference. All right, a reminder to like and subscribe. Subscribe to Pittsburgh Sports Live. That way you can get notifications whenever these shows go live. I didn't make any announcement about this show tonight. I didn't even tell Mike Osti, the head honcho here at the channel. But hey, I reserve the right to go ahead and do an emergency broadcast. Why not? Especially after a very eventful week for the Penguins. Talk to you next time. I can't promise when or where, but we'll have more Penguins content for you coming up on the channel, including the revival of my net front presence eventually, soon, I hope, before the holiday season really gets going. This is Matt Gajtka saying good night, God bless, and talk to you next time. Pens win by a bundle in Montreal. See you later.